video, we're going to be painting this kind of celestial moonlit scene with a dove. It's kind of a wintry painting. This is a step-by-step tutorial. It's for absolute beginners. You don't need any experience. We're going to be learning how to kind of blend paint. We're going to learn a very easy and simple technique that you can use to create all sorts of pine trees, and you can also create their reflection over the water. This painting is really perfect for that quiet time after the holidays when things really start to kind of slow down and settle. So I invite you to grab a cup of tea and we can have a nice little peaceful painting time together. So first, let's go ahead and go over our materials. The paints I'm going to use are going to be Liquitex Basics. And the colors I'm going to use are Titanium White, Phthalo Blue, Mars Black, Cadmium Yellow Light, and Cobalt Blue. You could really use any colors, any blues for the background that you'd like. This is just kind of what I chose for this more kind of navy blue painting. The canvas I'm using is 11 by 14. You could also do it on a 16 by 20, and this type of painting lends itself well to like a kind of long landscape. So you could even do a diptych. I originally did this painting in a diptych where it was two long canvases next to each other. So that's an option as well. The brushes I'm going to use today are going to be a 1-inch flat, a 1/2-inch flat, a little flat, anyone will do, just smaller than the 1/2 inch. This is just for our trees. I've got a size 12, so a very large bristle round brush, a size 12 pointed round. A size 7 would work as well if that's what you have, and then just a size 0 pointed round, any kind of little detail brush, and that'll really help with the dove and with some smaller pine trees if you'd like. So we are going to start off with, we've got a jar of water, some paper towels, and we're going to take our pointed round brush, go ahead and dip it in your water, and then just lightly touch it against the glass on the side so you don't get too much water. And we're going to mix up a tint. So a tint is where you're adding a little bit of paint color into a lot of white. So I'm going to take some white and just barely touch my brush into my phthalo blue. I separated the blues just to make it really clear for you guys because I'm sure on the screen they look similar. And I'm going to mix some phthalo blue in to make a light blue. Right now we're just outlining. I'm going to make mine a little bit darker just so that you guys can see really well, but it can be a very, very light blue. The majority of this painting is going to be the sky, and then a smaller portion is going to be the water in the foreground. So the next thing I'm going to do is eyeball halfway between vertically over here, and you can make a little mark there. And what I want you to do is go down even further, okay? So I'm going to go down about 2 inches from there, and that's where my horizon line is going to be. How this pointed round brush works is if I press down really hard, I can make a very thick line. If I very lightly glide along the canvas, I can make a very thin line. So just keep in mind that the more pressure you apply, the thicker your line is going to get. So I'm using just the tip of my brush here to glide across. So my horizon line is below the halfway point. Doesn't need to be straight, right? The ground is not perfectly straight, and we're also going to paint over this completely with snow and all sorts of things. The next thing I'm going to do is eyeball halfway between my canvas horizontally up here so you can make a little mark. And I want you to just imagine that if this is your square, that your moon is going to go roughly in the center of this square, and it's going to be 1 to 2 inches in diameter. It's been a while since I took math, but I'm pretty sure it's called diameter. Okay, so I'm going to use my pointed round brush here. I'm going to go about 2 inches down from the top there, and about 2 inches in from the side over here, and about 2 inches from the bottom. And then I'm just going to sketch in a circle. If you don't feel confident painting in a circle, I'm going to show you guys a little trick that you can do. Let me grab a jar. So any round cup will work. So you could take the cup and you could just paint the edge of your cup. And then you can just press it down like a stamp. So wherever I wanted my moon to be, I could just press it down and twist just a teeny bit. And that's how you can get a perfect circle. We also want one down below. So since the top half of our canvas and the bottom half are not even, right, the moon is going to be a little bit closer to the bottom of your canvas in its reflection. So we want this distance right here to be the same down here. So that's where my moon's going to start. So if you were using this technique, you could again just use your jar. If it isn't your paint jar, you might want to wipe the paint off right away so that it doesn't dry out on there. So I'm going to go in and just go around my moon. Start off a little bit larger than you plan on it being, because it's going to kind of shrink as you're filling in your background. And you can, if your brush is getting kind of dry, you can add just a teeny little bit of water to it. Okay. I always crack up when I'm like editing the videos and I hear myself going, okay, all the time. That's apparently my catchphrase, okay. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and start filling in the moon now. So we're gonna use this same brush, the pointed round. I'm gonna wipe it off on my paper towel. That's gonna keep my water cleaner longer. And then I'm gonna take my brush, I'm just gonna press it against the bottom of the glass and spin it in a circle. And we're gonna be using plain white. So I'm getting my brush pretty clean there. Dab it on the side, dab it on my paper towel. Oh, and I went and dipped in some blue there. So if you want to, you can paint your moon in just straight white. You'll notice that the white paint is slightly brighter than the gesso of the canvas. If you want to give your moon just the teeniest bit of a glow, you can take white and you can add a teeny dab of yellow. A little bit is going to go a long way. If you want to do a yellow moon, you can. But I'm doing just the palest yellow you can imagine. And I'm pressing down pretty hard and I'm just filling in my moon here. And after I get that filled in, I'm gonna go ahead and fill in my reflection down here. And if you have a lot of blue paint around your moon, you painted pretty thickly, I think thickly is the word, then you might want to kind of just leave some white gessoed canvas around it and not touch it, because otherwise you'll have a green moon. If that happens to you, don't worry, you've got plenty of time. You can just come in and paint over it after the light green dries. So I filled in my moons. If I want to, I could just leave them just like that. But if you want to add a little bit more interest, you can add some craters to your moon. So I'm going to take my brush, not cleaning it out, same brush, and I'm going to add just a little bit of black and a little bit of the phthalo blue and mix that in to make a dark bluish gray. So I used slightly more blue than black, so it looks a little too blue. So I'm going to grab just a little bit more black because I'm looking for a bluish gray color. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to add short brush strokes. So these are short brush strokes where I'm dropping and lifting my brush repeatedly. A long brush stroke is where you're dragging back and forth. So I'm going to do short brush strokes and I'm going to add it to the top left corner of the moon here. So short brush strokes. And notice the angle of the handle of my brush. If I go with my brush completely perpendicular to the canvas, I'm just gonna dig off the white paint that I added on. So if I make sure that the handle of my brush is close to the canvas, I can lay it on so that it kind of ices the top of it. And then wherever I add it up there, I'm gonna have to add it down here. So you want to imagine that this is like the butterfly, so the mirror image, and if you ever have to turn your canvas this way to kind of see what the mirror image would be, sometimes that helps me. So I'm gonna go and just, and this reflection does not need to be exact. No one's ever gonna look at your painting and go, oh, but there's a little mark there and there's not one down here. No one's ever gonna notice that. It's just more about the feel of it. And then I'm gonna add just a teeny bit to the bottom right corner. So after I've added in some little crater marks, now it's time to blend them in a little bit. So I'm gonna take my brush, wipe it off on my paper towel. I'm gonna clean it out in my water. I'm gonna make sure that I touch it against the side of the glass and dry it on my paper towel and make sure it's like nice and dry. You know, it's still damp, but nice and dry and flat. And I'm gonna lightly brush over these to blend them in a little bit more. So handles close to the canvas, short brush strokes, and I'm lightly just brushing over this to blend it in a little bit more. If you pick up too much paint, you're kind of dragging it out, you can wipe your brush off again. So up close, it's just gonna look like paint brush strokes because that's what it is. The illusion comes from when you look at your painting from far away. So if you're not sure about it, you can take a picture on your phone, or you can stand back and look at your canvas and see what you think. All right, so I've got my moon in there, and now it's time to fill in the sky. So for the sky, I've done a lot of, if you painted with me before, you know, in person or in a class or in a video, I often like to paint these kind of glowy moons. And what I've noticed when I'm painting with people is some people like to fill in their canvas with the 1-inch flat. Some people prefer the size 12 bristle round, and some people like a smaller pointed round. So I want you to know that at this point, you can really kind of use whichever brush you feel the most comfortable with. I'm gonna go ahead and go with my size 12 bristle round. And so if my pointed round has any paint in it, I'm just gonna drop that in my water so that it doesn't dry out on the brush. I'm gonna take my bristle round, I'm gonna dip it in my water, and what you're gonna notice is this brush holds so much water. So I get my hands pretty dirty when I'm painting with this, and I take my left hand and I just squeeze out the excess water, because otherwise it can kind of get a little bit messy on your canvas. So the next thing I'm gonna do is mix up a blue. So you might be wondering, why do we have a cobalt blue and a phthalo blue for this painting? It's because I love phthalo blue. It's one of my favorite paint colors, but if you mix that with black, instead of getting like a true navy, what you actually end up getting is a little bit green. And I'm not going for green in the sky, only in the trees here. So I'm gonna take some of my phthalo blue, and I'm gonna take some of my cobalt blue. And the cobalt blue, it has a little bit of a purple look to it. And that teeny bit of purple, which right is red and blue, is what cancels out that green, because there's a little bit of red, a red undertone, and that neutralizes the green. So I've mixed up my blues here. And now I'm going to show you the direction of our brush strokes. So for this sky, instead of just going up and down or side to side, we're going to do circular motions around the moon and heading out. So you can start over here, and especially down here is where I want that really bright blue. because I want it to kind of glow behind the trees. And I'm going to add first this plain blue, plain half cobalt, half phthalo blue, and then I'm going to add some black to it. So first I'm using just the straight blue, especially down here at the bottom. And don't worry if you go over your edge and it's jagged, because we're going to be adding kind of snow there and it'll cover that right up. So now, not cleaning my brush, same brush, I'm going to add a little bit of black. Start off with a little. You can always go back and grab more. And I'm going to mix that in to make this more of a navy blue. I'm going to take my navy blue and I'm going to fill in these areas that I haven't got to yet. And over here, I'm gonna go, I'm running out of paint, as you can see, but that's okay. I'm gonna go right until I get up next to my moon. So it's kind of like a backwards C brush stroke. And hopefully the glare isn't too bad on that. So before I go in to add in some white, I'm gonna darken up this corner just a little bit. So I'm gonna just grab some straight black now. And just make sure I get this corner really dark. It's just gonna kind of frame the picture. All right, and now I'm going to go in with my white streaks. So I'm going to get this all filled in first before I clean my brush out. You know, I'll add a teeny little black to this corner too, and this corner to really frame the painting. And you can paint your edges as you go if you'd like. So now I'm going to take my brush and I'm just going to wipe it off of my paper towel, again to keep my water clean. Now I'm cleaning out my brush, squeezing out the excess water, and now I'm going to grab just straight white paint. Pretty bold, I know. And I'm going to start around the moon. And this brush, it can look a lot of different ways, right? If the bristles are really fanned out, that's gonna make certain marks. If they're all squished together, that's gonna make a different kind of mark. So just keep that in mind, and also how hard you're pressing. So right now, my brush is a little bit fluffy. They're kind of fanned out, and I'm lightly going to brush around the moon. So it's gonna naturally kind of turn blue as you're doing it, and that's okay. You can go back and grab more white at any point. So if I go in and I add in some white streaks, right? At first they look really bright white. Now what's gonna happen if I keep brushing over them? They'll continue to blend in. So if you don't want them to blend in too much, then you might not want to keep brushing over them again and again. Brush over them, and whenever you feel like you like it, that's your stopping point. And that's kind of half the battle with art, is knowing when to stop. I'm also going to do some streaks going out into my sky. So I'm going to have one kind of go out right here. I'm going to have maybe some shorter ones coming down. And another one coming out over here, maybe a teeny little bit coming down over there. So same thing we talked about before, right? If I want to blend those in, I can lightly brush over them. So if at any point you wanted to, let's say you wanted to really blend something in, you could get your 1-inch flat brush wet and just dab it on your paper towel. And this brush is great if you wanted to like very lightly brush over something, it'll really blend it in and give you, and I'm using the flat side of my brush, it'll give you a very blended look. I kind of like the little lines that the Bristle round brush makes though. I'm kind of partial to that. But I just want to show you guys all the different things that you can do. So the other thing you can also do is if you were a little timid to get too close to your moon, with that giant brush, you can take your pointed round brush and that can help you get right up next to your moon and get a nice kind of clean edge around it. And I can also use my dark blue. I could add dark blue streaks around my moon as well, just to add more variation if you wanted to. Right now I'm just getting a nice clean edge there, going right up next to my moon. Take my dark Another technique you could use is you could literally just kind of like lightly spin around your moon. You're gonna go round and round. I'm gonna switch back to my bristle brush here. And just kind of lightly brush over what I've done. And definitely, if you're not sure if you've got it where you want it, definitely take a step back, look at it from far away, see what you think. And the next step will be, let me make sure that that glare is kind of off that for a minute so you can really see. Is that better? So you can really kind of see what it looks like. So the next thing we're gonna do is the easy part now, because we just did it. So we're gonna take this and we're gonna do it down here. We're not gonna do it as detailed and we're not gonna do it as well, because this is just the reflection in the water, so it does not need to be perfect. So because my bristle brush has some white in it still, I am going to clean it out. And I'm just gonna, So, good example of what happens if you get crazy cleaning your brush out. You might splash some water straight onto your sky that you just finished. And when you add water to acrylic paint, it removes the paint there. So the best way to take care of it is to take a dry paper towel and just dab off the water, and then take some paint and just paint over it. That's what's so cool about acrylic paint. It's so easy to paint over. About 5 seconds and all done. All right, all fixed. So I've got my bristle brush. I cleaned it out. I squeezed out the extra water, and we're going back to the beginning. So we've got our Cobalt Blue, our Phthalo Blue. Mix those together. This is the part where you might want to turn your brush, turn your canvas if it makes it more simple for you. So I'm going to show you what that would be like, and then I'm going to put mine back. So it might be easier for your mind to imagine here's the middle, so to know which directions your brush strokes go. So as above, so below here, and then around. And what you could do is you could just kind of sketch in the direction of your brush strokes, and then you could turn it back the other way. And everybody's minds work differently. So whatever technique works for you. Let me just get my canvas back in position here. All right. So I'm gonna fill this in. So first I'm adding just the straight blues together. Then I am adding in black, just like we did before. So we get our darkness in the corner here. As we run out of paint, we start to see more texture of the canvas. That's fine. Like I said, this is just the reflection. Doesn't need to be perfect. Add some darkness to the corner, just like we did up here. Right here and here. So now we gotta go here and here. I'm really loving this color. It is a little bit greenish, but it's kind of this deep, deep, deep dark turquoise. Kind of pretty. Okay. Then same thing, but I'm not even gonna clean my brush out. I'm just gonna go right in and grab some white. And I'm gonna start to go around my moon. We'll go in with another brush to get it a little bit more defined. And then I'm gonna try to add roughly the same streaks. So here's a big streak right there. So I'm gonna add a big streak right there. There's a big streak right there. Try to add one right there. And then maybe one out here. And then just slightly brush over them. Again, it really doesn't matter down here. Can't really stress that enough. All right, so now if you want to switch to your pointed round brush to get really up close to your moon, you can. And adding a little bit of water to your brush can help you kind of close it in. Yeah, I'm just adding in some thicker paint here. Keeping the direction of the brush strokes. So again, doesn't need to be exact. You'll notice this top one ended up like more vibrant blue and this one ended up more that kind of deep turquoisey green. That's absolutely fine, really doesn't matter. That does not need to be perfect. The only thing I want to do is I think I do want to darken up. I'm going to darken up this side here. So I'm going to take my 1-inch flat and some blue and black. I'm just gonna go over this and darken it up the best I can, because I really want it to feel like it's framing the painting with a little bit of darkness. Okay, I'm on a roll tonight. Just dripped some blue paint all over me, but that's fine. Okay, gonna clean this 1-inch flat out in my water. And we're gonna do most of this reflection, all of the lines to make the illusion of the reflection. We're gonna do most of that later, but we're gonna do a little bit of it now. So I'm gonna take, because our blue is a little wet and it's just gonna help. So I'm gonna take the 1-inch flat and some white paint. And how this brush really works, if you are using the flat side, right, you can make a big wide mark. If you use the edge, you can make a very thin line. And even if I'm using the edge, if I press down really hard, I'll still make a thicker line. So we're gonna be using, and I have somehow a ton of water in my brush, we're gonna be using the edge and we're gonna press down very lightly. And this is the easiest way that I've found to do straight lines. In order for there to be an illusion of water here, your brush strokes have got to be straightish. If they're curved at all, it's not gonna have the same illusion. And if you try to use a detail brush, usually our marks end up being less straight. So I'm gonna use the edge of my brush here, and I'm gonna use it to make short horizontal brush strokes. Did the same thing I did earlier where I dropped some water onto my canvas there. Horizontal brush strokes that are short, and they're gonna start off at my moon and then kind of go around my moon. So edge of my brush here, flick my brush out. Why is there so much water in here? So I think that my brush maybe is getting old, and these two pieces start to separate, and sometimes like water can get stored inside of there. So I think that's what's going on with me. Sorry about that, y'all. Okay, so some white paint, and I'm going to very lightly flick my brush out. And you might find that you make straighter marks going in one direction than the other. So for me, I make straighter lines if I go from left to right. So that's what I'm gonna do. So I don't want them to be perfect. I want some to be a little bit some to be a little bit shorter, some to be a little bit longer, some to the left, some to the right, right? You don't want it to look like a ruler. Some maybe you just touch the edge of your brush. And so we're doing this right now because what's going to happen is we're going to pick up some of the blue, and that's going to blend in, and that's kind of what we're going for. See, now I have some darker paint on my brush and it's just kind of blending in there. Where most of our lines are going to be, and I'm going to go back and grab more white, most of our lines are going to be here over the moon. We're going to want the moon to kind of eventually basically disappear. The edges start to really fade. I'm pressing down my brush just a little bit more now to make some thicker ones. So you can see the edges of that are really just blending. And I'm not going to do the ones up here yet because we still have to do our trees. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe my brush off, drop that in the water. The next thing we're going to do is paint our pine trees that are going to be in the background. So we're going to do our darker pine trees back here, then we're going to do our snow, then our lighter pine trees and the reflection. Okay, so pine trees can be done in a detail brush if you feel more comfortable with that. I'm going to be using my two smaller flat brushes. So I've got my 1/2 inch flat and then my little baby flat brush. So I'll start off with my 1/2 inch just so you can really see what I'm doing. And I shouldn't have made such a giant glob with this because I'd have more room to show you here how to do the pine trees. But I'm going to start off dipping my brush in my water. You do want to use quite a bit of water in your paint when you're doing pine trees because it's going to just make it easier to look more realistic. So I'm going to mix up some green, and this one in the green in the background is going to be the darkest green that we're going to use. So basically your dark blue colors, so it can have both blues and black in it, and then all you need to do is add yellow to make it green. So I'm mixing that around, and I do want it pretty darn dark. Pretty darn dark. I'm really talking special today. Okay, so I've got my dark green. So the first thing I'm going to do with this little square brush, I'm going to use the edge of my brush to do vertical lines. Again, this is perfect to do vertical lines for tree trunks. It's easier to do them more straight, even though tree trunks don't need to be perfectly straight. So I'm going to start by really framing the picture by doing some taller ones on the sides, and whatever is above is going to be below. So you're going to take your line and you're going to go straight through down into the water. So my first one's going to be about 1 inch in from the canvas, and you can really add yours anywhere. And I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom there. And then same thing over here. I'm going to go in, maybe have kind of a tall one. Go straight down into the water. And I'm going to go ahead and add in my tree trunks first. And I'm going to make sure I get variation, right? If all of these trees are the exact same height and they're all exactly 1 inch apart, that's not really how nature works, right? So we want to kind of add some variation. So maybe then there's a shorter one. And then maybe there's some that are a little bit further spaced apart. And then maybe there's more that are close together. And as I get here into the middle, I want them to be shorter and shorter. So over here, gonna do lots of little short trees, but still keeping the variation. So that's a good kind of base to start off with. And now I'm going to show you how to make them look like pine trees. So I'll show you the easiest technique first, and then you can kind of decide where you want to go from there. So the easiest technique to do a pine tree is to use the edge of your flat brush and to have the edge be your stamp. So I'm stamping left to right or right to left, and I'm kind of stamping stripes onto here. Now if I slightly aim my brush down at a triangle, so right, aiming down, then I'm going to do a pine tree where the branches go downwards. There's both. There's pine trees that where the bristle, or not the bristles, the branches go up, and there's ones where they go down. So that's kind of personal preference. Up close, this is going to look like little globs of paint. And from far away, it's going to give the illusion of pine trees. Now, it's really important that it doesn't look too perfect, right? This isn't a ruler. So maybe I need to add in a little short branch somewhere. Make sure that the trunk is thicker than the top of the tree. That's the easiest technique. It's a little bit harder if you want your branches to go upwards. And you might have to switch to either your smaller square brush or your detail brush. Now, if I really want my branches to go upwards, I can switch to my detail brush, and I can kind of very lightly dab my brush, and I'm just painting it in, and I can paint them in going upwards. This one I've already kind of done downwards, but I'm just gonna kind of show you on here. Let me see if I can find some space to do another little tree, because I think it's going to be hard for you guys to see on the dark background. So you can imagine just V's, and you could even paint in V's. But right, it needs texture. So maybe I dabbing my brush with my little detail brush. Maybe I use the edge. And let's say your tree gets way too wide at the top, you can always just make it a little bit taller. And for right now, we're doing just dark trees. We're not adding on any highlights yet. So let's go ahead and get going with those babies. And again, you can add a little water to your paint if you want to. So for my background ones, I'm going to do pretty much just straight across or aiming down, because they're just fading into the background. They don't really need to be too detailed. I'll spend more time making the ones in the front look more like they're going upwards, kind of like Christmas trees. I'm going to make this even a little bit taller. If your background's too dark to see it, then that's when you might want to add a highlight on your trees in the background. Also, maybe there's a tree that's, we're not seeing the whole tree, but we just see the branches coming in on the edge of the canvas. You could just add those in. Same thing over here. So as I get to the little itty bitty ones, then you can decide if you want to just very carefully use kind of the corner of your 1/2 inch flat, or you may find that you want to switch to your detail brush or your smaller flat brush. So I'm switching to my smaller flat brush here. Another way that I didn't show you that you can do, if you want something really simple, you haven't painted much before, you can use your detailed brush, and you can kind of start your brush strokes in the center line of your tree on the trunk and brush outwards. So I can brush out to the left and out to the right. And that's a very simple way of doing some little pine trees. But this, and you could even stamp over this to just make it look more realistic after you kind of draw it in there. It's the stamping that really gives the texture of the pine needles and the branches. And I'm not doing the reflection just yet, but I will soon. I feel like I might need a taller one over here. Add another little one in here. I'm gonna do a kind of tall one back here, just because. And then the next step would be to do whatever you did up top to do it below. I definitely would use your larger, not your giant one, but your 1/2 inch flat. And if you have to turn your canvas sideways, you can do that. And I am not gonna make these too perfect. I'm just gonna pretty much go for it. As long as it looks semi like a triangle, that's gonna be good enough for me. And we'll end up painting over a lot of these too when we add in our snow, so there's that too. All right. So before we move on, I just want to show you a little technique if your background was too dark and you can't see them. So mine's like just about right. Like I can just faintly see them in the background, but they don't stand out a ton. But let's say you got your trees in there and you can just barely even see them. You could go in with your highlight now. So you could add just yellow to your paint and do a light green highlight and just use the edge of your 1/2 inch flat and lightly tap over the edges of your branches. And you could also add a teeny bit of white if you wanted. It kind of depends on the green. If you wanted to look like a brighter, more vibrant green. And you don't have to do it to all the branches. Maybe you do it to just a couple. But that's how you could make those trees in the background stand out a little bit. So edge of your 1/2 inch flat and just kind of lightly tap the edge of the branches. Okay, I'm gonna take my brush and I am now going to add in, let's go ahead and do the stars. We'll do the stars while we wait for this to dry just a teeny little bit before we go in with the snow. So I'm going to take my pointed round brush and I'm gonna get it as clean as possible. And if your water's really dirty, you may need to clean your water out. I've got a backup clean water here. Make sure it's really, really clean. And I'm gonna take my brush and I'm gonna grab some white paint and move it to another part of your palette. So I'll move it to where you can see it. I'll move it right here. And I'm gonna go back and forth from my water to the paint. And I'm gonna mix it around until it gets kind of like melted ice cream. That's the consistency you're going for. You don't want it to be like straight up water, but you do want it very watery. Now you can practice this on the side first before you go onto your canvas to make sure that you've got it how you want it. I'm right-handed, so I'm gonna hold my brush at the end of the handle with my left hand, and I'm gonna tap this black part that's holding the brush bristles in. I'm not gonna touch on the actual brush, so I'm getting all over my hand, but I'm tapping right below there. Now, if I hold on to this really tight with my left hand and I smack it, I'm gonna make lines, kind of like Jackson Pollock lines. If I very lightly tap and let it bounce, woo, and let it bounce, then I'm going to get little teeny dots. Okay, so I can go on the side here, see how my dots are coming out. And with stars, they don't just spread out everywhere, they can be in clusters. So maybe there's like a lot in one area and maybe there's less in another area. I'm also going to go down in my reflection. Obviously, I'm not going to line them up so that they're exactly on the top as they are on the bottom. It's just bouncing up and down. I want a pretty starry sky here, so I'm kind of going to town. Normally I would do like, oh, just a little accent, but right now I'm like, woo, partied up. Let's go for it. Stars everywhere. Okay. That's about where I want it. I'm going to add some more around the moon here because I left it kind of bare. Poor guy. Okay. And there's my stars. Now while I'm giving this even a little bit more time to dry, I'm going to paint in some very, very bright stars. So I'm going to take my detail brush. Actually, you know what? You could use your detail brush, but if you have it, use your small, you know, size 3 flat brush. So I'm going to take this one, make sure my brush is nice and clean, no blue in it. And the reason I want this brush, right, is what we talked about before. A flat brush is easier to make a straight line. So I'm going to take some white paint, and I'm going to use my watery white over here. Even though I cleaned my brush really good, whoops, there's still some blue in there. A little blue's fine, but I don't want too much. So I'm going to take my watery white paint, and I can show you basically what you're going to do on the side here, but I'll show you in color so that you can really, really see it. So you're going to use the edge of your brush to do a star. So you're using the edge to do a vertical line, a horizontal line, and then 2 diagonal lines. And I usually try to make the vertical line and the horizontal line the longest, especially the vertical line. Now, you might find that you want to rest your hand on your canvas, and you can, just be careful for the stars that are still wet on there. So I'm going to do, let's see, I'm going to do kind of one main big star, and I'm going to have it kind of halfway between the moon and the right edge of my canvas and down about 2 inches. And there doesn't need to be a little splatter star there. This one we can just kind of paint in. So I'm going to use the edge of my brush and do a horizontal line and a vertical line and some diagonal lines. So that's going to be my biggest star. And then maybe I'll have a medium star over here in this pile. So first I'm doing it in my watery white paint. If you did something you didn't like, you could take a wet paper towel and just kind of erase it. So now I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to dry it off a little bit, and now I'm going to use straight white. And I'm going to go over it again, but I'm not trying to trace over the whole thing. I'm just trying to brighten it up close to the center. So I'm going to go right in here, do a vertical line again, horizontal line again, and diagonal. Same thing over here. And when I paint for you guys, I have to paint like sitting really far back so that you don't basically see my head in the shot, but it makes it kind of difficult to get a good angle here. So excuse my stars if they look a little wonky. And then I'm going to take literally a glob of paint, and I'm going to use the corner of my size 3 flat brush, but you could also use your detail brush. I'm going to do a glob of paint and stick it right in the middle of my 2 main stars here. So it really looks like it's shining and like it's glowing. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is add in our snow, and then while we let our snow dry for just a moment, we'll come in and do a little dove flying if you want to. Oh, and also if you want to add in the reflection star, you can do that. It's not, you know, you don't have to, but you can. So I can kind of eyeball. This one would be kind of off the canvas, but I can go in here and just add in, and then same thing over here. It'd go right about here. Let's see. We'll do it like right here. And remember, in a reflection, everything's not going to be as vibrant. It's going to be much more vibrant up top. All right, so I'm going to switch now to my 1/2 inch flat brush, which I've now gotten both of my waters dirty. So this is what I'm working with for the rest of this painting. So I'm cleaning out my 1/2 inch flat brush, cleaning it really well. Leave it kind of damp, but still dab it on my paper towel. And now for this, I'm gonna wanna get my brush 1/2 in white paint and then 1/2 in dark blue. Not super dark blue, but pretty dark blue. So if you still have some dark blue left, you can use that. It looks like I am pretty much out. So I'm gonna take some blue, some of my cobalt blue, and I'm gonna take just a little bit of black, not a lot, just enough to kind of give it a navy look. Mix that around and have that ready and available. So now I'm gonna load up my brush on one side. So it's on both the front and the back of the brush, but it's just on one side with the white. And then I'm gonna dip in my dark blue on the other corner. So let me see if I can get this where you can really see it. Right, so it's on both sides of the brush, so it's fully loaded. Now I'm gonna line up my brush so that the white is on the top, so it's closest to the top edge of my canvas. And I'm gonna start over here on my horizon line, and I'm gonna go up, make a little hill, go down, and I'm just gonna kind of go up and down as I go across, but I'm gonna try to make it not too perfect. So maybe it goes up a lot, then maybe it's like really bumpy in one area. And now I'm slowly turning my brush sideways as I get towards the middle here so that it gets smaller. And then I can load my brush up again. My brush is kind of getting empty already. So same thing, making sure I get the paint on the same side I got it on before. And I'm gonna come over to this side, onto my horizon line. Maybe I'll make it a little bit flatter over here. And now I'm slowly turning my brush sideways, and that's making it thinner towards the middle. So that gives us a nice base to work with. If you wanted to blend it in more, you could make sure that you've got the white side on the top and the blue side on the bottom. And if I continue to brush over this, they'll continue to blend together. So it's kind of up to you how blended you want it, how blue you want it. That part's up to you. Make this just a little bit bluer over here. And now I'm gonna go in. You could use the same brush. I'm gonna make sure I get some really kind of brighter white here in the middle. And I'll add a little hill right there. And now I'm gonna switch to another brush. So for this part, you could use your pointed round brush, and you could also use your size 3, your small flat brush. Either one would work for this. But the idea is we're gonna create some overlapping so that we have some dimension. So it looks like some's in the back and some's in the front, some of the snow. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take plain white, my pointed round brush. I'm gonna make sure that I've got that along the top edge here. And now I'm gonna kind of divide it up. So maybe there's another little hill right here. And maybe there's another little hill right here. I'm gonna do the same thing over on this side. So we want it to look like the snow's kind of coming out into the water. So I'm gonna do a brush stroke coming out into the water there. Maybe another one right there. Maybe my last one right there. So now we're kind of going to get some overlapping by adding white and then the dark blue under it. So now you can clean your brush off or just dry it off, and now grab your dark blue, same brush, and you're gonna go underneath your snow, and try not to have too much paint on your brush right now. So I'm gonna come in under my snow here, under the white I just did, and I'm gonna add some blue. After that, you can go in and kind of mess up your snow a little bit. You can add some short brush strokes so that you get some streaks. You can take your brush and make it flat, and you can brush half on the white, half on the blue to get them to kind of blend together if they need to be a little bit more blended. I do feel like the short brush strokes really help it look more like snow. Right, because we think snow is just plain bright white, but if we really stop and look at it, we see that the way the shadows and the light hit it, it gives it darkness in some areas, lightness in some others. So now, let's see. That's looking about where I want it, but I am going to darken this up just a little bit. And then I'm gonna add just a little bit more white so to really make something look like it's in front of, right? I added some dark there, and now I'm just gonna go in and add some fresh white in front of it. Get a nice crisp line for my hill there. And I think too, I want just one kind of big hill right here that's just kind of framing the moon. So I'm gonna go right here. The snow is kind of moving up and down, and I'm gonna have it really go up there. Just to have one kind of taller bit of snow there. Okay, so for the next step, we can either use your pointed round brush, or you can also use your 1-inch flat, but basically we're trying to add a dark line underneath that. So I'll show you both brushes. So I've got my pointed round here, and I'm gonna use pretty much straight black. If there's a little blue in it, that's okay, but pretty much straight black. And this line does not need to be straight at all. It's actually fine if you're trying to make it straight and then your hand ends up wiggling a little bit. That's really gonna help. And we're just going right across here. And so we added that bright blue kind of underneath the snow. This is going right underneath that. So we're not trying to paint over that. We're just kind of going right underneath that. This is really going to separate the top from the bottom. So if you were to do that with your 1-inch flat, if that just feels more comfortable to you, just make sure that the edge of your brush is very flat. Your brush can be a teeny bit damp, and you can just use that to kind of go across the edge. And actually, while I have this, I'm going to take this brush, load it up with just black, and I'm going to use the edge, and I'm just going to stamp some horizontal marks with straight black. Down here, it's kind of a Bob Ross technique. And it's just going to give the illusion of water. So horizontal little stamping marks underneath the snow. So you can see now your snow is really starting to pop more with that nice kind of dark shadow underneath it. And I'm not going to do too much of a reflection for the snow, and the reason is when we come in and like finish our reflection down here, we're going to add horizontal brush strokes with the edge of our brush to add lots of white lines, and it'll kind of give the illusion of the snow reflection down there. So don't really worry about that right now. Okay, so all we have left now are our trees and our little dove. Let's go ahead and do the dove first, and that way you don't run out of space for your dove if you go a little too cray with your green trees. So for the dove, I would use your detail brush, so the smallest brush that you have. And I can actually draw, if I can find my canvas pad here, I can draw a little dove on here for you to see. So it doesn't need to have a lot of detail because it's going to be so small, but I'll draw you a big one so you can see what it's going to look like. So the first thing I would do is paint it in white, and then I would add in some gray over it. So I'll do mine in gray just so that you can see it on here. So I'm going to take white and black. No blue this time, just white and black. Mix those together. Start off small. You can always make it bigger if you need to, and I'll try to hold this as steady as I can. So basically the shape of your dove, I would start off doing a line for the wings, and that's going to help you with the direction your dove is flying. So if here's my moon and I want my dove to be flying towards my moon, then I'm going to do the direction of my line. I'm going to do a curved line kind of going towards the moon. So that's going to be the wingspan. And then I'm going to go above the wings here, and that's where I'm going to do my head. And the head's going to be a line kind of curving up, a line curving down. And then from there, there'll be a little beak. And then for the body, I'm going to dip down, give it a little belly. And for the back, I'm going to just kind of swoop down towards the body. And the tail, I'm going to do a V kind of going upwards. So now with the pointed round brush, it's kind of perfect to do feathers. So I'm starting, and that'll be the same with your detail round brush. I'm starting at the outer part of the tail and brushing in to get some nice feather marks. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the wings. So I'm going to start out here, my longest one, and go in. I'll go down a little bit, go in, down a little bit, and in, down a little bit, and in. And then I'll do a little short one here. Same thing over here. So at first, I'm not making sure I don't press down too hard. Now I'm going to make one shorter. And you could always make them, the wings, longer. It's easier to make them longer than it is to make them shorter. So now I could fill that in, really see what I'm working with there. So let's say I'm like, you know what, I want his wing a little bit longer, right? Then I could just go over that, go over that, go over that. See how easy that is? Same thing over here if I wanted it longer. But you'd want to do this in white. And then add the gray into it. So I'll show you adding some white onto this, which I've got some kind of thick gray paint, but you'll get the idea. Basically doing your brush strokes in white and gray. It's so small, it really just does not need to be exact. So if I did it in white, then I could just go in and add some gray brush strokes to the body. So now I'm going to show you on the canvas here with my little itsy bitsy detail brush. So I got my brush damp. I'm going to take some white paint. I'm spinning my brush in a circle on my palette, and that's just redefining my point so there's no kind of giant globs. Now my original painting, I did the diptych and I did two doves kind of flying together. It was more of like a romantic scene. So if you're feeling romantic, you could do two. I'm gonna do just one little dove in this one. And let's see, I'm gonna put my dove kind of in between these two stars, but down below it. So this should be dry enough, probably not your snow, but the sky, that you can rest the side of your hand. And I'm going to start off doing that swooping kind of C motion that I showed you on our giant dove that we did, going towards the moon. So the wings look like it's flying towards the moon. Got my backwards C here. I'm adding just a little water to my paint so I get smooth lines. And now I'm gonna do the head, just like before. Teeny tiny little beak. Grabbing more paint, spinning my brush in a circle, redefining the point. Got the body. And a little V going out and upwards for the tail. Looks like I'm gonna run into this star here. Gonna do my brush strokes starting out and going in for the tail. And then I'm really gonna make sure I have a little bit of water mixed in with my paint for this, for these wings. I don't want to see the texture of the canvas. So my first one, I'm gonna make it really skinny and really curved in. Spin in a circle, redefine my point, go down a little bit, do another one, and then just making them shorter as they get towards the middle. I'm gonna go over the face again. Same thing over here. Go over my first feather there. And if your brush starts to get just too loaded, like mine is right now, I'm just cleaning it out completely and starting from scratch. My brush just got too loaded with paint. And I need to make some kind of thin lines here. So now I'm gonna do my next feather. Start off making them thinner because you can always go back and make them thicker, but it's gonna be a lot more challenging to make them thinner. Ah, see, there I did it. I did it. I thickened that feather up. Got a big chunky feather now, that's all right. It's gonna keep him warm for the winter. All right. So now, if you wanted to, you could go in and add just a little bit of gray. To the body. And you don't really have to because, I mean, the paint is a little bit transparent, and so I'm sure you're seeing some variation just naturally on its own. I'm gonna add a little bit of gray to the body and the head. And now I'm gonna go back in and really use some globs of white, especially at the edges of the feathers. So I'm gonna go straight in now, white, right at the end of that feather to really make it stand out. And I'm starting at the end of it, and then I'm just kind of lifting my brush as I go towards the middle so that the white's kind of basically just on the end there. Gonna go over a little beak and the top of the head. I'll do one bright white along the bottom of the belly. And then I'm just gonna make that tail feathers really bright white at the end. And that's my dove. It's not as pretty as the original dove that I painted, but I think it'll work out. Just making sure I get a nice kind of swooping line there. Okay, so I've got my dove. Let's see. Looking at this, something that I wish that I had done is maybe just a little bit more of a glow along this moon. So before I go to those trees and get all that green in there, I'm gonna try to add just a little bit more of a glow. So I'm keeping my bristle brush a little bit wet, taking some white, and I'm gonna kind of scrub my brush in a circle until it kind of fans out. And I just want to lightly brush with a little bit of white around here to just give it a little teeny bit more of a glow. And that's personal preference. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the glow right now. Yeah, that's better. All right, drop that brush off in my water. And now we're getting close to the end. Exciting. We're gonna do our pine trees that are more in the foreground. So you're gonna need some green paint, and you can use your 1-inch flat or your 1/2-inch flat. And my paint's getting a little dry, so I might need a little bit of water. So I've got blue, I'm gonna take some yellow. So in the original painting that I did of this, I used kind of a nice turquoise color. I was feeling it really bright. But this time around, I was kind of going for a more muted look. So it's really up to you what you want to do with that. Okay, my brush is insanely loaded up with paint now. All right, I'm gonna use the edge of my brush to do the same thing we did before. So I'm gonna do the vertical line, but this is important. You're not gonna go down into the water this time because this snow is not a part of the reflection. It's not a part of the water. And if you went straight through your snow, that's not gonna work. So these trees are gonna sprout up out of the snow. All right, so maybe I have one on top of this little hill here. So using the edge of my brush to do a vertical line. And do another one right there. Do another one right here. Maybe there's gonna be a really tall one. And don't worry about your trees behind them. These can go right over the front of them. I'm gonna do, let's see, I'll do another kind of tall one right here. I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna have one kind of right on the edge here. And do another one on this hill. And then maybe some short little ones that are just kind of hanging out on this snow. So maybe, let's see, a little one here and a little one here. All right, so same technique as before. I'm gonna try harder to make my branches kind of go at an upward angle for these ones. And I'm gonna wait to add too much white in until after I've kind of got it stamped in there. So if you want to now, you can go in and make your tree trunk a little bit darker. So I could take just some straight black right now and just make my tree trunks just a little bit darker, a little bit thicker. I'm just dipping one corner of my 1/2 inch flat in black. That was probably too thick for that guy, but that's all right. Just darken up that tree trunk. Okay, same technique as before, using the edge of my brush as a stamp. I'm not gonna have my branches go all the way down to the bottom of the tree trunk. I'm gonna have them have like at least a centimeter, 1/2 centimeter at the bottom there. So I'm gonna start by stamping in some branches. And I'm doing these big ones first before I switch to a smaller brush. Gonna get some darker shadows in there, so I'm getting some straight black. And now I need to switch to an even smaller brush. So you can switch to your detail brush or your small flat brush. Especially for these little guys in here. Kind of zigzagging up the tree. And now I think I'm gonna switch to my detailed brush. I might go back to my small flat, but for now I think I'm gonna switch to my detailed brush. And now I'm gonna get some more yellow. And now I'm gonna add some white into it. I'm going for a lighter green. So if you want it to be more neutral, you can add some black. That's kind of about the color that I'm going for. And then I'm gonna add some highlights. So for one, I can add a little highlight to the tree trunk by just going down the edge of my trees. That was bold, that was bold. And this is why we use the edge of our flat brush to do straight lines. That's exactly why. And now I'm gonna go in and just start painting in branches more delicately and more detail. So I'm doing my kind of V and a lot of short brush strokes. Kind of dabbing my brush. I'm going to try to add my highlights. So I just did that on the right side. I'm going to try to add my highlights mainly to the right side of each tree branch. And that's because that's the side that the moonlight is hitting. And over here, I'll try to do it on, sorry, did I say right? I said on the left side of my tree, because that's the side closest to the moon. And over here on the right side of my tree, because that's the side closest to the moon. So whichever side is closest to the moon, that's what you want to go for. So I'm just mixing together white, yellow, black, and a teeny bit of blue. If you wanted to get some kind of brighter highlights, you could use more white, more yellow to get a really bright highlight. And you wouldn't want to do this everywhere, but maybe on the tips of a few branches. So it's like the moon is really hitting it. You can tell I'm getting tired because I started to paint a little bit sloppy. This is quite a long time to go in the painting without taking a break. So if at any point you feel like you gotta take a pause, have a snack, step back, and look at what you've created so far, definitely go for it. I'm gonna add in some more shadow branches, so more of the black, blue with a little bit of yellow, more of the dark green. Just really wanting these guys to kind of stand out here. So it's going to make them stand out. It's going to be contrast. So I can add in more dark, more light, more dark, more light. And I'll get to those guys in a second. Remembering to keep variations, so some branches are longer and some branches are shorter. If your brush or your paint gets kind of dry, you can always add a little bit more water. got some really bright yellowy green on my brush, and I'm just barely touching it in some areas to really just give a bright highlight, but I'm just barely, oh, I was just barely touching my canvas. You could imagine it's snow on there too. If at any point you want to add in a little shadow from your tree trunks, you can clean out your size 3 flat brush and you can take some blue. You could do straight blue, you could do blue and black. You can go to the bottom of the tree trunk and use the edge of your brush and just do, and make sure your brush isn't too wet. My brush is pretty wet there. You could start in the tree trunk and just kind of flick your brush out towards the right, over here on the right side. Give them little shadows. These ones, because they're right under the moon, you could kind of just do horizontal line right under the tree. This one probably would shoot over to the left. It's one of those things you kind of got to step back to see again. To really get the illusion. I'm gonna go in with some black in my small flat brush and just get a little bit more action on these trees. I'm adding some dark marks over it to really give that contrast to make them pop. I'm going to add some kind of shadowy marks to my big guys over here, only on the right side. And you can stamp right under your branches too to really give that contrast and make it pop. What I feel like is missing right here in the middle is maybe some dark bluish gray trees. So I'm going to do some blue, white, and black. Try not to have too much yellow in there. gonna add some more trees here in the middle. Ooh. Wow. I was getting some globs of paint on my arm there and didn't even know it. This is finger painting with Julia. Let's just go for it. Okay. And I'm just kind of doing my quicker technique right now just to fill that in a little bit. I just wanted to look like there was more trees back there. Okay, I'm going to switch back to this brush for a minute. Stamping over those just a little bit with some black paint. And the last thing to really finish up, well, for one, there's this giant thick tree trunk that I did that I have to fix or it's gonna bother me. So I'm just taking my detail brush here, getting some snow, some white snow, and we're just gonna cover that baby up a little bit. I got a little wild with my tree trunks over here. It's amazing how long these little details at the end can take. They can really add to it. And so something you want to remember is that tree branches grow all the way around the tree. So even though we're kind of using this technique of doing the right and the left side to create the illusion, making some marks in the center of the tree, shorter ones and ones that go right through the middle, will really give that illusion that the branches are growing all the way around the tree and not just out the sides. That's just an easier way to paint them. So you'll notice I'm kind of just going back and forth to my light and to my dark. And that is about it. So you can finish up your trees, and then the last thing is going to be the reflection on the bottom. So for the reflection on the bottom, I would just go quickly with your 1/2 inch flat. Take some of your lighter green. You can get some light green and some dark green on your brush, and go down below the snow. Down below the snow, especially with your big trees that you got. So we're doing our bright green trees now. Down below the snow, and then we're going to use our edge of our brush and just kind of stamp. And I'm just kind of stamping in a zigzag motion. If you need to turn your brush sideways to use the mirror technique, make it like a butterfly, you could do that. But it's really just about getting the color in right now that I need, because I'm just gonna go in and mess it up anyway. So I've got my bright limey green, I've got my turquoisey green, I got my white and yellow, you may think, oh wow, my upside down tree is like so much better than my right side up one. And you can always turn your canvas over too and to paint your trees the right way if you want. I'm just not being that particular. All right, so I've got my tree reflection in there. Now I'm going to use my large 1/2 inch flat. Damp, but not, you know, super full of water. And now I'm going to go down here. First I'll use the edge of my brush, and let's do just straight white. And I'm going to very lightly, I'm going to use the edge of this brush like a stamp. And I'm going to stamp some little marks right underneath the black that we did before. And I'm going to make some of them short. And some of them long. But really making sure that I basically barely touch my brush. And if your marks are all kind of coming out similar, you can turn your brush over. So right along the bottom of that black there. And if you want to do some small ones with your 1/2 inch flat, you can do that as well. Just getting your brush dry, dipping the edge in white. Let's see, where can I add? I want to leave some spaces like just straight black though too. So now I'll just kind of come out into the water a little bit. I don't like how wet my brush was over there, so I'm just gonna do that again. This is not a technique you want your brush like too wet. All right, and now you could use this brush. You can use your 1 inch flat or your 1/2 inch flat, and we're gonna draw some horizontal lines. So I'm gonna do some, and they'll go right over the tree. And I'm gonna try to make mine as straight as possible while painting at a little bit of an angle here. So especially down below those kind of bright white and black marks that we made, I'm gonna use the edge of my brush to come in here. And we're doing the reflection of the snow. So instead of like just fully painting in the snow, we're just using the edge of our brush to just paint in white down here. And you can dip in the blue too. So 1 inch flat, dipping in the white and the blue. And it's not like I'm trying to completely cover up, make it solid, but I am trying to definitely add more lines. And while I have white and blue on my brush, I can come in. And then I also want to do some lines that are just blue. So no white on my brush now, and just the dark blue. You can have some black in it or just straight blue is fine, either one. especially over my trees here. Really get those to blend in a little bit. And this is, again, another one of those times, sometimes less is more, so if you need to step back and see what it looks like, you can. Some little globs of paint might help to really make it stand out and look like water. So I'm just trying to mimic the snow that's up there. I'm just trying to kind of lightly mimic it down below. And that's it. That's the last step. So whenever you're finished with your painting, you can paint the edges if you haven't already. You can sign your painting if you'd like to. You can sit with it for a few days, see if you want to add something else in. I want to thank you so much for joining me and painting this painting. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them down below. And I want to thank you so much for supporting my channel. Make sure to follow. I've got some more paintings coming up, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.